My father demanded I attend my golden sister's wedding, threatening to cut off my tuition payments. He had no clue I secretly graduated valedictorian and was making six figures. Just before the ceremony, I quietly gave him an envelope. When he opened it, can you imagine being told, plain and simple, go to your sister's wedding or I'm cutting you off? You hear me? That gut punch came from my own father, his voice sharp and final. What he didn't know was he'd already cut me off years ago, and I'd spent that time building a life he couldn't even fathom, one he was about to lose control of forever. My name is Laura, and I was 22, living in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon. On my desk sat an acceptance letter, a secret no one in my family knew about, a graduate program in environmental engineering. I'd earned it, truly earned it, all on my own merit. For most of my life, I'd been the invisible daughter. My family had eyes only for one person, my younger sister, Jessica. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Every tiny achievement of hers was celebrated like a national holiday. Me? I was just the backup plan. The disappointment. The one who existed to make Jessica shine brighter by comparison. This wedding my father was threatening me over? Jessica's big day. She was marrying Trevor, some guy from a wealthy family, steeped in commercial real estate. I'd met him exactly twice, and both times, he looked right through me like I was part of the wallpaper. They were perfect for each other, really. Both so self-absorbed they could barely see past their own reflections. Dad, I have exams that week, I said, a lie that tasted bitter in my mouth. The truth was, I'd already graduated 3 weeks prior. Summa cum laude. Valedictorian of my class in environmental engineering. I'd even accepted a job offer, starting at a whopping $110,000 a year. None of them knew. I'd stopped sharing my accomplishments with my family years ago. What was the point? They just didn't care. Exams can wait, he snapped. Your sister's wedding happens once. Do you think your mother and I struggled to put you through school so you could skip family obligations? Struggled? I almost laughed out loud. They'd paid my first semester of tuition 4 years ago, and they'd held it over my head ever since, as if they'd bought me a palace. After that first semester, I'd taken out loans, worked 3 part-time jobs, and applied for every scholarship I could find. I paid my own way through college, while they practically threw money at Jessica's sorority fees, lavish spring break trips, and a designer wardrobe. I'll think about it, I said, trying to keep my voice flat. You'll do more than think about it. You'll be there in a dress, with a smile on your face, or you can forget about me writing another tuition check. Your choice. He hung up before I could even respond. I set my phone down and looked around my small studio apartment. It wasn't much, kitchenette, bathroom that sometimes smelled like the neighbors cooking, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every book, paid for with money I'd earned myself. My family had no idea I'd been financially independent for years. The threat about tuition? It was laughable. There was no tuition left to pay. I'd finished my degree, topped my class, and landed a position at Thornberry Systems, one of the top environmental engineering firms in the Pacific Northwest. I was set to start in 2 weeks, right after Jessica's wedding, which, frankly, I had zero intention of attending. My father didn't know that. Neither did my mother. And Jessica? She probably didn't even know I existed half the time. I scrolled through the family group chat. It was a digital shrine to the wedding, flower arrangements, seating charts, dress fittings, rehearsal dinner plans. My mother had sent approximately 400 photos of Jessica in various white gowns, each one gushing with commentary about how stunning she looked, how lucky Trevor was, how this was the happiest day of their lives. Not once had anyone asked me how I was doing. Not once had anyone acknowledged that I was finishing my final year of college. When I'd mentioned my graduation date a month ago, my mother had just breezily responded, "Oh, that's nice, honey," before immediately changing the subject to Jessica's bachelorette party. I'd stopped expecting anything different years ago. Jessica was the star, and I was the stagehand. That was the family dynamic, and I knew it wasn't going to change. But what they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to find out, was that I'd outgrown needing their approval. I'd built a life they knew nothing about, achieved things they'd never celebrated, and created a future that had absolutely nothing to do with them. The envelope sat on my desk, thick and official. Inside was a cashier's check for the exact amount my parents had paid toward my first semester of college 4 years ago. I'd calculated it down to the penny, $12,350. It had taken me months to save it, setting aside portions of my paychecks, living on ramen and discounted groceries, but I'd done it. I wasn't giving it to them out of obligation or gratitude. I was giving it to them to cut the last thread that tied me to their control. Once they had this money back, they'd have no leverage over me. No threats, no guilt trips, nothing. The wedding was in 2 days. I'd already decided I wasn't going, but I hadn't told them yet. Part of me, the part that had been ignored and dismissed for so long, wanted to see the look on my father's face when I handed him that envelope. I wanted him to realize that his threats meant nothing, that I didn't need him or his money, and that I'd succeeded in spite of them, not because of them. Maybe it was petty. Maybe I should have just cut ties quietly and moved on. But after years of being treated like I didn't matter, I wanted them to know exactly what they'd lost. Growing up in my family felt like living in a spotlight that was always pointed at someone else. Jessica was 3 years younger, and from the moment she was born, everything revolved around her. She was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could wrap my parents around her little finger with a single smile. I, on the other hand, was practical, quiet, focused on school because that was the only place I felt like I mattered. My parents never said I wasn't good enough, but they didn't have to. Their actions made it clear. When I made honor roll in middle school, my mother glanced at the certificate and said, "That's wonderful, sweetie," before turning back to help Jessica rehearse for her dance recital. When I won a regional science fair in high school, my father patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good job," then spent the rest of dinner talking about Jessica's cheerleading squad making it to nationals. I learned early on that my achievements were footnotes in the grand story of Jessica's life. By the time I got to college, I'd stopped trying to compete for their attention. I focused on my studies, worked my jobs, and built a life separate from theirs. I came home for holidays because it was expected, but I stopped sharing details about my classes, my internships, or my plans for the future. What was the point? They weren't listening anyway. Jessica, meanwhile, coasted through a business degree at a state school, funded entirely by our parents. She joined a sorority, went to parties, and posted endless photos of herself on social media, looking glamorous and carefree. She graduated with mediocre grades and no job prospects, but that didn't matter. She'd met Trevor during her senior year, and he had money and connections, which was all my parents truly cared about. The engagement had been announced 6 months ago at a family dinner I'd reluctantly attended. Jessica had stood up, flashed a massive diamond ring, and squealed about how Trevor had proposed during a weekend trip to wine country. My mother had cried tears of joy. My father had shaken Trevor's hand and welcomed him to the family. I'd sat there, smiling politely, while they toasted to Jessica's happiness and bright future. Nobody asked me about my future. Nobody asked if I was seeing anyone or what my plans were after graduation. I was just part of the audience, applauding someone else's life. After that dinner, I'd driven back to Portland and made a decision. I was done trying to be part of this family. I'd finish my degree, get my job, and move on. They could have their perfect daughter, their perfect son-in-law, and their perfect life. I didn't need to be included. But cutting ties wasn't as simple as just walking away. There was still the matter of my father's threats. His constant reminders that he'd paid for my education, his insistence that I owed them something. That's why I'd saved the money, to pay them back. I wanted to close that chapter cleanly, with no lingering debts or obligations. The night before the wedding, my mother called. I was packing the envelope into my bag, double-checking that everything was in order, when her name flashed on my screen. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Laura, honey, I just wanted to make sure you're coming tomorrow. Your father's been worried you might not show up." Worried? I almost laughed. As if they cared about me being there for any reason other than appearances. "I'll be there," I said. "Oh, good. Jessica will be so happy. She's been asking about you." That was a lie. Jessica hadn't asked about me in years, but I didn't call my mother out on it. There was no point. What time does the ceremony start? I asked, even though I already knew. 3 in the afternoon, but we're doing photos beforehand, so family needs to be there by 1. You'll be there by 1, right? I'll be there. And you'll wear something nice. Jessica wants everyone to look their best. Of course she did. I glanced at the simple navy dress hanging in my closet. It was perfectly appropriate for a wedding, but I knew it wouldn't meet Jessica's standards. She'd probably make some snide comment about how I should have tried harder. I'll look fine, Mom. Okay, honey. We'll see you tomorrow. And Laura. Yeah, try to be happy for your sister, okay? This is her special day. I hung up without responding. Try to be happy for her. As if I'd spent my entire life doing anything else. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about what I was going to say when I handed my father the envelope. I'd rehearsed it a dozen times in my head, but I still wasn't sure I'd be able to get the words out without my voice shaking. Part of me wondered if I should just mail the check and skip the confrontation altogether. It would be easier, cleaner, less dramatic. But another part of me, the part that had spent years being ignored and dismissed, wanted them to see me. Really see me. I wanted them to understand that I didn't need them, that I'd made it on my own, and that their approval had stopped mattering a long time ago. The wedding was at a lavish venue in Beaverton, about 20 minutes from my apartment. I arrived at 1:15 p.m., 15 minutes late, because I'd sat in my car for an extra 10 minutes, trying to work up the nerve to go inside. The venue was beautiful, of course. Jessica had spared no expense. The garden was filled with white roses and twinkling lights, and a string quartet played softly near the entrance. Guests milled around in expensive clothes, sipping champagne and admiring the decorations. I walked inside and immediately spotted my parents near the front, talking to Trevor's family. My father was laughing at something Trevor's dad had said, his hand resting on my mother's back. They looked happy, proud, completely absorbed in the moment. I took a deep breath, gripped the envelope in my hand, and walked toward them. My father saw me first. His expression shifted instantly from relaxed to annoyed. "You're late," he said, loud enough that a few people turned to look. "Traffic," I lied, my voice tight. My mother glanced at my dress and frowned. "Oh, Laura, that's what you're wearing?" I looked down at my navy dress. It was modest, elegant, and perfectly appropriate. But I knew what she meant. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream wealth or status. It was just a dress. "It's fine," I said. "Well, I suppose it'll have to do. Come on, we need to take family photos before the ceremony." She gestured toward a group gathering near a floral arch. I didn't move. Instead, I held out the envelope to my father. "What's this?" he asked, taking it but not opening it. "Open it." He gave me a suspicious look, then tore open the envelope. His eyes widened as he pulled out the check. "What is this?" he repeated, but his tone had changed. He wasn't annoyed anymore. He was confused. "It's a check for $12,350, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "That's the exact amount you paid for my first semester of college. I'm paying you back." My mother leaned in to look at the check, her mouth falling open. "Laura, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you've been holding that tuition payment over my head for 4 years, I explained, the words coming out in a rush, years of unspoken resentment spilling forth. "You've threatened to stop paying for my education every time I didn't do what you wanted." "Well, I'm done. That's your money back. Now you don't have any leverage." My father stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Leverage? Laura, what are you talking about? We were trying to help you." "Help me?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You paid for 1 semester and then acted like you'd funded my entire degree. I paid for the rest myself. Loans. Scholarships. 3 jobs. I did it all on my own while you threw money at Jessica like it was confetti." "That's not fair," my mother said, her voice rising, drawing more attention. "We've always supported you." "No, you haven't," I countered, my voice growing stronger. "You supported Jessica. I was just an afterthought." People were starting to stare now. I could see guests pausing their conversations, turning their heads toward us. My father's face flushed red, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. This is not the time or place for this conversation. Your sister is about to get married. I know, I said, meeting his gaze. And I'm not staying. What? I'm not staying for the wedding. I came here to give you that check and to tell you that I'm done. Done pretending I'm part of this family. Done being invisible. Done letting you treat me like I don't matter. My mother reached out like she was going to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Laura, you're being ridiculous. You can't just leave. Watch me. I turned and started walking toward the exit. My father called after me, his voice sharp and commanding, Laura, get back here right now. I didn't stop. I kept walking, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, but my steps steady. Behind me, I could hear my mother's voice, high-pitched and frantic, saying something about how embarrassing this was. How I was ruining everything. But I wasn't ruining anything. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. I made it to my car and sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Part of me expected my father to come storming after me, to demand I come back, to threaten me with something new. But he didn't. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the opulent venue and my suffocating family behind. As I drove back toward Portland, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, but most of all, freedom. I'd spent so long trying to earn my parents' approval, trying to prove I was worth their attention. And for what? They were never going to see me the way I wanted them to. But here's the thing, I didn't need them to. I'd built a life without their help. I'd earned my degree, landed my job, and proven to myself that I was capable and strong. Their opinion of me didn't change any of that. Still, there was a small, nagging thought in the back of my mind. They didn't know about my graduation. They didn't know about my job. They didn't know what I'd accomplished. Part of me wanted them to find out, to see exactly what they'd dismissed, what they'd overlooked. But another part of me wondered if it even mattered. Would it change anything? Would they suddenly realize they'd been wrong about me? Or would they just find a way to downplay it, to make it seem less important than Jessica's wedding or Trevor's job or whatever else they decided was worth celebrating? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I'd taken the first step toward cutting them out of my life. And as terrifying as that felt, it also felt right. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, staring at the acceptance letter for the graduate program. I hadn't decided yet if I was going to accept it. The job at Thornberry Systems was incredible, and I didn't want to pass it up. But the program would open even more doors, give me even more opportunities. For the first time in a long time, I had choices. Real choices. And nobody was going to take that away from me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. Where did you go? Mom said you left. What's going on? I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whatever happened next, I was done explaining myself to people who didn't care. The week after I left Jessica's wedding, my phone exploded with messages. My mother called 17 times in 3 days. My father sent increasingly angry texts demanding I explain myself. Jessica left voicemails that started out confused and quickly turned accusatory. I ignored all of them. Instead, I focused on preparing for my new job. I spent my days researching Thornberry Systems, reviewing the projects I'd be working on, and organizing my apartment. I bought professional clothes, set up a home office space, and tried to convince myself that cutting off my family had been the right decision. Most of the time, I believed it. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep, doubts crept in. Had I overreacted? Should I have just sucked it up and attended the wedding? Was I being petty and vindictive? Then I'd remember the way my father had looked at me when I handed him that check, not with understanding or pride, but with confusion and irritation, like I'd interrupted something important. I'd remember my mother's immediate concern about my dress, not about me. And I'd remember the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like a supporting character in someone else's story. No, I hadn't overreacted. I'd finally stood up for myself. On Thursday afternoon, 5 days after the wedding, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Jessica standing in the hallway, dressed in designer jeans and a silk blouse, her hair perfectly styled. I considered not opening the door, but curiosity got the better of me. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping the door partially closed. Can I come in? How did you even get my address? Mom had it from when you moved in. Can I please come in? We need to talk. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Jessica walked into my apartment and looked around, her nose wrinkling slightly. I knew what she was thinking. My place was small, simple, nothing like the luxury condo she and Trevor had just moved into. What do you want, Jessica? She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. I want to know why you ruined my wedding. I didn't ruin your wedding. I left before it even started. Exactly. You left, and it caused this huge scene. Mom spent the entire ceremony crying. Dad was furious. Everyone was asking where you were and what happened. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I crossed my arms. I'm sorry my absence was inconvenient for you. That's not what I meant. She wiped at her eyes, smudging her mascara. I just don't understand. Why would you do that? Why would you give Dad that money and just walk out? Because I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. What are you talking about? You matter. You're my sister. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really? When's the last time you asked me how I was doing? When's the last time Mom or Dad came to one of my events or celebrated one of my accomplishments? Jessica looked genuinely confused. What accomplishments? And there it was. The proof that I'd been invisible all along. I graduated 3 weeks ago, I said quietly. Summa cum laude. Valedictorian. I gave a speech at the ceremony. None of you came because none of you knew about it. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't care. Her mouth fell open. You graduated? Why didn't you say anything? Because every time I tried to talk about my life, you or Mom or Dad changed the subject to talk about you. Your sorority. Your boyfriend. Your wedding. Your plans. There was never room for me in the conversation. Jessica sank onto my couch, looking genuinely shaken. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You never asked. I continued, my voice firm. Laura, I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't realize that you were the only one Mom and Dad cared about. That I spent my entire childhood and most of my adult life trying to get them to notice me. That I worked 3 jobs to pay for college while they handed you everything. She flinched. That's not fair. I didn't ask them to do that. No, but you never questioned it either. You never once thought about how it might feel to be me. Always standing in your shadow. Always being compared to you and coming up short. I never compared us. That was Mom and Dad. And you benefited from it, I said, sitting down in the chair across from her. Look, I'm not angry at you, Jessica. Not really. You didn't create this dynamic, but you didn't do anything to change it either. And neither did I, until now. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. What happens now? I don't know. I start my new job on Monday. I'm moving on with my life, without us, without expectations, without needing your approval or Mom and Dad's validation. If you want to be part of my life, you're going to have to actually be interested in my life, not just show up when it's convenient. Jessica nodded slowly. I can try. I want to try. Then start by listening. I got a job at Thornberry Systems. I'm going to be working on environmental engineering projects. Designing sustainable water systems. I'm making 6 figures. I'm also considering a graduate program that would let me specialize in environmental policy. Her eyes widened. Laura, that's amazing. I had no idea. Nobody did. Because nobody asked. She stood up, looking uncertain. I should go. Trevor's waiting in the car. But Laura, I really am sorry, and I'm proud of you. For what it's worth. I walked her to the door. As she stepped into the hallway, she turned back. Are you going to talk to Mom and Dad? I don't know. Maybe eventually, but not now. I need space. She nodded and left. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling exhausted. The conversation had been emotionally draining, but it had also felt necessary. Maybe Jessica would actually make an effort. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I'd said what I needed to say. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. Your mother is devastated. You owe her an apology. I stared at the message, anger rising in my chest. Even now, after everything, he was making it about them, about how my actions had hurt them. Not once had he acknowledged how they'd hurt me. I typed out a response and deleted it 3 times before finally settling on something simple. I don't owe anyone anything. I paid you back. We're even. His reply came immediately. That money doesn't erase 18 years of raising you. You're being selfish and ungrateful. Selfish. The word stung because part of me worried he was right. But the larger part of me knew he was wrong. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. Setting boundaries isn't ungrateful. And refusing to accept mistreatment isn't a character flaw. I turned off my phone and went to bed early, trying to clear my head before my first day at the new job. My first week at Thornberry Systems was overwhelming in the best way possible. The office was modern and bright, with an open floor plan and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My team consisted of 6 other engineers, all brilliant and passionate about environmental sustainability. My supervisor, Gretchen, was a woman in her 50s who'd been in the industry for decades and had a reputation for being both demanding and supportive. I threw myself into the work, grateful for the distraction. We were in the early stages of designing a water reclamation system for a municipality outside Seattle. I spent hours running calculations, reviewing environmental impact assessments, and collaborating with the team on design solutions. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again, not someone's daughter or someone's sister, just Laura, an engineer doing work that mattered. On Friday afternoon, Gretchen called me into her office. "How's your first week been?" she asked, gesturing for me to sit. "Good. Really good. I'm learning a lot. You're doing excellent work. I've been impressed with your contributions this week." She paused. "I also wanted to mention something. We're putting together a proposal for a major project with the city of Portland. It's a comprehensive sustainability initiative, water systems, waste management, green infrastructure. If we win the contract, it'll be one of the biggest projects the company has ever taken on." "That sounds incredible." "It is, and I want you on the team. You'd be working closely with me and 2 senior engineers. It's a lot of responsibility, especially for someone just starting out, but I think you can handle it." I felt a surge of excitement. "I'd love to be a part of it." "Good. We're presenting the proposal to the City Council in 3 weeks. I'll need you to help with the technical documentation and be prepared to answer questions during the presentation." I left her office feeling energized and proud. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd worked so hard for, and I'd earned it on my own merit, not because of family connections or favoritism. That evening, I met up with Kelsey, my best friend from college. She was one of the few people who knew the full story of my family dynamics. We met at a small restaurant in downtown Portland, and I filled her in on everything that had happened since the wedding. "I still can't believe you actually handed him a check and walked out," she said, shaking her head in admiration. "That's the most badass thing I've ever heard." It didn't feel badass at the time. It felt terrifying. But you did it anyway. That's what matters. She took a sip of her wine. "Have you heard from them since Jessica came by?" "My dad keeps texting me. My mom leaves voicemails. I've been ignoring most of it." "Good. You don't owe them anything, Laura. You've been taking care of yourself for years. They just didn't notice." That's the thing that bothers me the most. They didn't notice. I worked so hard to be independent, to not need their help, and they just assumed I was struggling or failing or whatever. They never once considered that I might actually be succeeding. Kelsey reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Their loss. Seriously, you're brilliant and successful, and you don't need their validation. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to." We spent the rest of dinner talking about her job, her dating life, and our plans for the summer. It felt good to focus on normal things, to have a conversation that wasn't weighed down by family drama. When I got home that night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. My heart sank when I recognized my mother's handwriting on the front. Inside was a card with a generic message about family and forgiveness. Below the printed text, my mother had written, "Laura, please come home. We miss you and we love you. Whatever issues we have, we can work through them together. You're our daughter and we want you in our lives. Please call me. Love, Mom." I stared at the card for a long time, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think that maybe things could be different. but another part of me knew better. This wasn't an apology. It wasn't an acknowledgement of how they'd treated me. It was just a plea for me to come back and pretend everything was fine. I set the card aside and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept replaying memories. The time I won a math competition and my parents forgot to pick me up from school because they were at Jessica's dance recital. The Christmas when I got practical gifts like socks and a calculator, while Jessica got a new laptop and designer purse. The countless dinners where I sat silently while everyone discussed Jessica's life. And then I thought about the future I was building for myself. The job that challenged and excited me. The independence I'd fought for. The respect I was earning from colleagues who valued my skills and contributions. I didn't need my family to validate me anymore. I'd learned to validate myself. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. The next morning, I woke up to find a text from Jessica. Mom told me she sent you a card. I know you're mad, but please at least consider talking to them. They really do miss you. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I got ready for the day and went for a run, trying to clear my head. When I got back, I finally replied, I appreciate you reaching out, but I need more time. I'm not ready to have that conversation yet. Her response came quickly. I understand. Just know that I'm here if you need me. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Maybe Jessica was genuinely trying. Maybe not. Time would tell. The following week, I dove deeper into the Portland Sustainability Project. The scope was massive, redesigning the city's water infrastructure to reduce waste and improve efficiency, implementing green spaces to manage stormwater runoff, creating educational programs about environmental conservation. It was exactly the kind of work I dreamed of doing when I first chose environmental engineering as my major. One afternoon, while I was reviewing cost estimates, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with a local area code. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. Is this Laura? Yes. Who's this? This is Trevor, Jessica's husband. We met briefly we've met a couple times. I sat up straighter, surprised. What do you want? I wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a few minutes? Trevor's voice was hesitant, almost nervous. It was strange hearing him sound uncertain. Every time I'd met him before, he'd been confident to the point of arrogance. I'm listening, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Look, I know things are complicated with your family right now. Jessica told me what happened at the wedding, and I wanted to reach out because I think there's something you should know. What is it? He paused. Can we meet in person? I'd rather not have this conversation over the phone. I hesitated. Meeting Trevor alone felt weird, and I wasn't sure I trusted his motives, but curiosity won out. Fine. There's a coffee shop on Northwest 23rd called Brew Point. I can meet you there in an hour. I'll be there. I spent the next 45 minutes trying to figure out what Trevor could possibly want to tell me. Maybe he was playing mediator for my parents. Maybe Jessica had sent him. Or maybe this was something else entirely. When I arrived at Brew Point, Trevor was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood when he saw me, looking uncomfortable in jeans and a casual button-down shirt. Thanks for meeting me, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I got you a coffee. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I just got a regular drip. Thanks. I sat down and wrapped my hands around the warm cup, waiting for him to explain. Trevor ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that seemed out of character. Okay, so I'm just going to say this straight out because I don't know how else to do it. Your parents have been lying to Jessica and me about their financial situation. I frowned. What do you mean? About 3 months ago, your dad came to me asking for a loan. He said they were having some temporary cash flow issues with his business and needed $20,000 to cover expenses until a big client paid them. He promised to pay me back within 60 days. My father ran a small consulting firm that helped businesses with financial planning. It was a decent business, but not exactly lucrative. Still, $20,000 seemed like a lot to ask for. Did you give it to him? I did. He's family, and I wanted to help. But the 60 days came and went, and when I asked about it, he kept making excuses. First, it was that the client payment was delayed. Then it was that they had some unexpected expenses. Eventually, he told me he'd pay me back after Jessica's wedding. Let me guess, he hasn't paid you back. No. And when I pressed him about it last week, he told me that he actually needs another $15,000 to keep the business afloat. He said if I didn't help them, they might lose everything. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. So, what does this have to do with me? Jessica mentioned that your parents paid for your college education. She said they've been financially supporting both of you for years. But if that's true, why would they need to borrow money from me? Why would they be struggling? I let out a short, bitter laugh. They didn't pay for my education, Trevor. They paid for my first semester 4 years ago. 1 semester. I paid for everything else myself, through loans, scholarships, and working multiple jobs. And I seriously doubt they've been financially supporting Jessica the way you think they have. His face went pale. What? My parents like to take credit for things they didn't do. They've been telling people for years that they put me through college, but it's not true. And I'm willing to bet they've been exaggerating their financial contributions to Jessica's life, too. Trevor looked genuinely shocked. But they talk about it all the time. About how much they've invested in both of you, how much they've sacrificed. It's a performance. They want people to think they're generous, supportive parents, but the reality is very different. I paused. Did my dad say why his business is struggling? He said it's been a tough market, that clients are tightening their budgets, the usual stuff. But now I'm wondering if any of it is true. It might be true. Or he might be bad at managing money and too proud to admit it. Either way, it's not your problem. I know, but Jessica is worried about them. She thinks they're on the verge of losing their house. She's been talking about us helping them financially long-term, maybe even moving them in with us if things get really bad. I could see the panic in his eyes now. Trevor came from money, but he wasn't stupid. He knew that supporting his in-laws indefinitely could drain his resources and strain his marriage. What do you want me to do about it? I asked. I don't know. I just thought you should know what's happening. And I guess I wanted to ask you directly, did they really pay for your college? No. They paid $12,000 4 years ago. I paid them back last week. We're even. He absorbed this, his jaw tight. Jessica doesn't know any of this. Then maybe you should tell her. I'm not sure she'll believe me. She idolizes your parents. She thinks they're saints who sacrificed everything for their kids. That's because she's the only one who actually benefited from their sacrifices, real or imagined. I took a sip of my coffee. Look, Trevor, I can't help you with this. I cut ties with my family for a reason. If you want to know the truth about their finances, you're going to have to investigate that yourself. Ask for documentation, bank statements, business records. Don't just take their word for it. You're right. I know you're right. It's just, this isn't what I signed up for. Welcome to my world. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Trevor said, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Walking away from the wedding, setting boundaries. Jessica told me what you said about being invisible, and I think she's finally starting to understand how messed up the dynamic was. Maybe. Or maybe she's just upset because things are getting uncomfortable. He smiled grimly. Probably a little of both. After Trevor left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, thinking about everything he'd told me. My parents were in financial trouble, possibly serious trouble. And instead of being honest about it, they were manipulating people and creating more debt. Part of me felt vindicated. They'd always acted like they were so much more successful and stable than I was, like they had everything figured out. Turns out, they were just better at hiding their problems. But another part of me felt sad. My parents had spent so much energy maintaining appearances, pretending to be something they weren't, that they'd lost sight of what actually mattered. And now they were paying the price. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last text my father had sent me. You're being selfish and ungrateful. I typed out a response. I know about the money you borrowed from Trevor. I know about the business struggling. If you're in trouble, be honest about it instead of blaming me for setting boundaries. I'm not coming back to save you. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. His response came an hour later. How dare you interfere in my business? This has nothing to do with you. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That evening, Jessica called me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Trevor told me about the money, she said without preamble. Is it true about college? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? What? Would it have mattered? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe. I just feel like I don't know anything anymore. I thought Mom and Dad were these perfect parents. And now I'm finding out they've been lying about all kinds of things. They're not perfect, Jessica. Nobody is. But they've been using their supposed generosity as leverage for years, and I'm done playing along. I'm starting to see that, she sighed. Trevor wants to ask them for financial records before we give them any more money. I think he's right, but I don't know how to bring it up without them getting angry. That's between you and Trevor. I can't help you with that. I know. I wanted you to know that I believe you about everything, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd gotten from anyone in my family. It didn't fix everything, but it was something. Thanks, Jessica. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and stared at the ceiling, feeling emotionally exhausted. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of confrontations, revelations, and decisions. I'd cut ties with my parents, started a new job, and watched my family's carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. And through it all, I'd stayed true to myself. I'd set boundaries. I'd demanded respect. I'd refused to let them make me feel small anymore. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But it was necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Kelsey. How are you holding up? I smiled and typed back, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm finally free. 3 weeks after my conversation with Trevor, I was deep into preparations for the Portland Sustainability Project presentation. Our team had put together a comprehensive proposal that included detailed technical specifications, cost analyses, environmental impact projections, and implementation timelines. It was some of the best work I'd ever been a part of, and I was proud of what we'd created. The presentation was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at City Hall. The City Council would be there, along with representatives from several other firms competing for the contract. It was high stakes, and I'd spent the previous week rehearsing my portions of the presentation until I could recite them in my sleep. On Wednesday evening, the night before the presentation, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer. We hadn't spoken since the wedding, and I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever conversation she wanted to have. But curiosity got the better of me. Hello? Laura? Honey, it's Mom. Her voice was strained, like she'd been crying. I need to talk to you about something important. What is it? It's your father. He's had a heart attack. My stomach dropped. What? When? This afternoon. He collapsed at the office. They rushed him to the hospital, and he's stable now, but the doctors say he needs to make some major lifestyle changes. Less stress, better diet, more rest. I sank onto my couch, processing this information. Despite everything, he was still my father. The thought of him having a heart attack scared me more than I wanted to admit. Is he going to be okay? They think so. But Laura, we need to talk about his business. With him in the hospital, someone needs to step in and help manage things, at least temporarily. And with everything that's been happening, I thought maybe you could. No, Mom, I cut her off, my voice firmer than I expected. Laura, please. I know things have been difficult between us, but your father needs help. The business is struggling, and if someone doesn't step in, we could lose everything. Then hire someone or ask Jessica. Jessica doesn't know anything about business management, and we can't afford to hire someone. You're the only one who has the skills and knowledge to help us through this. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pull of guilt and obligation. This was exactly what they'd always done. Waited until there was a crisis, then expected me to fix it. Mom, I'm sorry Dad is sick. I really am. But I can't drop everything to save his business. I have my own career, my own responsibilities. Your career can wait. This is family. Family works both ways. You can't ignore me for years and then expect me to come running when you need something. We never ignored you, Laura. We've always loved you and supported you. That's not true, and you know it. You paid for 1 semester of college and held it over my head for 4 years. You dismissed my achievements, overlooked my struggles, and made it clear that Jessica was the only one who mattered. And now that you need something from me, suddenly I'm important? That's not fair. We did the best we could. Maybe, but your best wasn't good enough, and I'm not going to sacrifice my life to fix your problems." She was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had turned cold. "So that's it? You're just going to abandon us when we need you most." "I'm not abandoning you. I'm setting boundaries. If you need help with Dad's business, hire a consultant. If you need emotional support, call Jessica. But don't ask me to give up everything I've worked for to bail you out." "Fine. I can see we can't count on you. I'll figure something else out." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my phone, feeling shaken. Part of me wondered if I'd made the wrong choice, if I was being too harsh, but another part of me knew I'd done the right thing. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who only valued me when they needed something. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the conversation with my mother, imagining worst-case scenarios where my father died and my family blamed me for not helping. But I also kept reminding myself of all the times they'd dismissed me, all the ways they'd made me feel worthless. I couldn't let guilt manipulate me into going back. The next morning, I got up early and put on my best professional outfit, a charcoal gray suit with a cream blouse. I styled my hair carefully, applied minimal makeup, and checked my reflection in the mirror. I looked confident, capable, like someone who belonged in a room full of city officials and business leaders. At the office, my team gathered for a final run-through of the presentation. Gretchen gave us a pep talk about staying calm and confident, answering questions directly, and remembering that we had the best proposal. "You've all done incredible work on this," she said, looking at each of us. "The council would be lucky to work with us. Remember that." We arrived at City Hall 30 minutes early and set up in the conference room. The space was impressive: high ceilings, wood paneling, a long table where the council members would sit. Other firms were setting up their presentations, too, and I recognized a few competitors from industry conferences. At exactly 2 p.m., the council members filed in and took their seats. There were 7 of them, a mix of men and women ranging from their 30s to their 60s. The council president, a woman named Diane, called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here today. We'll be hearing presentations from 4 firms competing for the Portland Sustainability Initiative contract. Each firm will have 30 minutes to present, followed by 15 minutes for questions. Let's begin with Thornberry Systems." Gretchen stood and launched into the opening portion of our presentation, outlining the scope and vision for the project. Then she turned it over to Marcus, one of the senior engineers, who walked through the technical specifications for the water infrastructure redesign. When it was my turn, I stood and approached the screen where our slides were displayed. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "Good afternoon. I'm Laura, and I'll be discussing the environmental impact assessment and long-term sustainability metrics for this project." I clicked to the first slide, which showed projected water conservation numbers over a 20-year period. I'd spent hours on these calculations, verifying every figure, making sure our predictions were both ambitious and realistic. Based on our models, implementing this water reclamation system would reduce municipal water consumption by 32% in the first 5 years, with that number increasing to 48% by year 10 as the system reaches full optimization. I walked them through the data, explaining the methodology, addressing potential concerns, and highlighting the environmental benefits. As I spoke, I could see some of the council members nodding, taking notes, leaning forward with interest. When I finished my section, I handed the presentation back to Gretchen, who closed with budget projections and implementation timelines. The whole presentation took exactly 28 minutes. "Thank you," Diane said. "Now we'll open the floor for questions." The questions came fast and intense. The council members wanted to know about permit requirements, construction timelines, maintenance costs, and community impact. Our team fielded each question smoothly, drawing on weeks of preparation and research. One council member, a man in his 50s named George, focused specifically on the environmental impact section. "Laura, your projections are impressive, but they seem optimistic. What happens if we don't see these conservation numbers? What's the contingency plan? I had anticipated this question. We've built in conservative estimates at every stage. The 32% reduction in year 5 assumes standard adoption rates and typical weather patterns. Even in a worst-case scenario, say, slower public adoption or a particularly wet year that reduces the urgency of conservation, we'd still see a minimum 20% reduction. And our implementation plan includes quarterly assessments so we can adjust strategies in real time if needed. He seemed satisfied with that answer. A few more questions followed, mostly technical details that Marcus and Gretchen handled expertly. When the 15-minute question period ended, Diane thanked us and called a brief recess before the next presentation. We gathered our materials and moved to the hallway. Gretchen had a huge smile on her face. That was excellent. You all did fantastic, especially you, Laura. You handled those environmental questions like a pro. Thanks. I was nervous about that part. You didn't show it. You came across as confident and knowledgeable, exactly what they need to see. We waited while the other 3 firms presented. I tried to focus on reviewing our proposal, looking for any weaknesses in case we needed to submit revisions, but my mind kept drifting. I thought about my father in the hospital, my mother's phone call, the weight of family expectations that I'd finally managed to shake off. And then I thought about this presentation, this opportunity, this career I'd built entirely on my own. I'd earned my place in this room. Nobody had given it to me. Nobody had pulled strings or made calls on my behalf. It was mine. After all 4 presentations were complete, Diane addressed the room. Thank you to all the firms who presented today. The council will deliberate over the next week and announce our decision at next Thursday's public meeting. We appreciate the time and effort that went into these proposals. We packed up and headed back to the office. The energy in the car was buzzing with excitement and nervous anticipation. Gretchen treated the whole team to an early dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, and we spent the evening decompressing and analyzing how the presentation had gone. I think we have a real shot at this, Marcus said, raising his glass. Honestly, our proposal was stronger than anything else they saw today. Don't get overconfident, Gretchen warned, but she was smiling. But yes, I think we did well. Now we wait. When I got home that night, I found another envelope under my door. This time it was from my father. His handwriting was shaky, but recognizable. Inside was a short letter. Laura, your mother told me about your conversation last night. I'm disappointed in your decision, but I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. You've made it clear that your career is more important than family. I hope you can live with that choice. When I'm gone, remember that I asked for your help and you refused. Dad. I read it twice, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Even from a hospital bed. Even after a heart attack, he was still trying to manipulate me with guilt. The letter wasn't an attempt to mend our relationship or acknowledge his part in our estrangement. It was a weapon designed to make me feel like a terrible daughter. I walked to my kitchen, turned on the stove, and held the letter over the flame until it caught fire. I dropped it into the sink and watched it burn, the paper curling and blackening, his words turning to ash. I wasn't going to carry his guilt anymore. The next week crawled by. Every day at work felt like waiting for exam results. We'd submitted our proposal, done our best, and now the decision was out of our hands. I tried to focus on other projects, but it was hard to concentrate. On Tuesday evening, Jessica called. Hey, she said. I heard about Dad. Mom said you refused to help with the business. That's not exactly what happened, but sure. I'm not calling to lecture you, actually. I wanted to tell you that Trevor and I talked to Mom and Dad about their finances. We asked to see bank statements and business records, and it's worse than we thought. Dad's business has been losing money for over a year. They've been living on credit cards and loans, using new debt to pay off old debt. They're in serious trouble. What are you going to do? Trevor's arranging for them to meet with a financial advisor, someone who can help them restructure their debt and maybe file for bankruptcy if it comes to that. We're also setting up a meeting with a business broker to see if Dad's firm has any value as a sale. That sounds like the right move. Yeah. And Laura. Trevor asked them directly about your college tuition. Dad admitted he only paid for 1 semester. Mom tried to defend it, said they'd Planned to pay for more but couldn't afford it. But the point is, they lied to us. To their friends. Probably to themselves. I'm sorry. I didn't believe you sooner. It's okay. You believed what they told you. That's not your fault. It kind of is though. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked you about your life instead of just assuming everything was fine. She paused. I know things are still complicated between us, but I want to try to have a real relationship with you. Not the fake sister stuff where we only see each other at holidays. Actually knowing each other. I'd like that too. Good. Can we get coffee sometime? Just the two of us. Yeah, I'd like that. After we hung up, I felt lighter. Maybe Jessica and I would never be super close, but at least we could be honest with each other. That was more than we'd ever had before. Thursday arrived, the day the city council would announce their decision. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m., and Gretchen invited the whole team to attend. We sat together in the public seating area, watching as the council worked through routine business items first. Finally, Diane reached the agenda item we'd been waiting for. Next, we have the announcement regarding the Portland Sustainability Initiative contract. After careful deliberation and review of all 4 proposals, the council has reached a unanimous decision. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The contract will be awarded to Thornberry Systems. Their proposal demonstrated the most comprehensive approach to environmental sustainability, the most realistic timeline, and the strongest technical expertise. Congratulations to the Thornberry team. The conference room erupted in applause. Gretchen grabbed my hand and squeezed it, her eyes shining with excitement. Marcus was grinning ear to ear. The rest of the team was hugging and congratulating each other. We'd won. The next few weeks were a blur of contract negotiations, project planning meetings, and press coverage. The Portland Sustainability Initiative was big news in the local environmental community, and several media outlets wanted to interview the team behind it. Gretchen selected me to participate in a few of these interviews, and I found myself being quoted in the newspaper and featured in a local business journal article about young professionals making an impact. One article included my photo and a brief bio mentioning that I graduated valedictorian from my engineering program. The day it was published, I received a text from Jessica. Mom saw the article. She's freaking out. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Sure enough, an hour later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the message later. Laura, I saw the article about your project. I had no idea you were working on something so important. Your father and I are very proud of you. I know things have been difficult, but we'd love to see you and talk about everything. Please call me back. I deleted the message without responding. 2 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a framed copy of the newspaper article featuring me, along with a card from my parents. Laura, we're so proud of everything you've accomplished. We always knew you were capable of great things. We hope you'll give us a chance to be part of your success. Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at the card for a long time, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. They were proud of me now that my success was public, now that they could brag about it to their friends. But where were they when I was struggling through college? Where were they when I graduated with honors? Where were they during the years I spent working multiple jobs and studying late into the night? They wanted to be part of my success, but they'd never been part of my struggle. I put the frame in a closet and threw the card away. That weekend, I met Jessica for coffee as promised. She looked different somehow, less polished, more genuine. We sat in a quiet corner of a cafe and talked for 2 hours about everything: our childhood, our parents, our different experiences growing up in the same house. I think I was in denial for a long time, Jessica admitted. It was easier to believe Mom and Dad were perfect than to acknowledge how unfair things were. But after everything that's happened, Trevor's loan, Dad's heart attack, finding out about the business, I can't pretend anymore. It's hard to see your parents as flawed human beings instead of infallible authority figures. Yeah, and I feel guilty too, you know. Guilty that I benefited from their favoritism. Guilty that I didn't stand up for you. Guilty that I just accepted everything without questioning it. You were a kid, Jessica. You can't blame yourself for how they chose to treat us. Maybe not. but I can take responsibility for how I treat you now. She looked at me seriously. I want you to know that I see you. Really see you. And I'm impressed as hell by what you've accomplished. The project, your job, everything. You did it all on your own, and that's incredible. Thank you. That means a lot. We made plans to meet for lunch the following week. And when we parted ways, I felt hopeful that maybe we could build something real. The following Tuesday, I received an email from my father. It was short and formal. Laura, I wanted to inform you that I'm selling the business. The heart attack was a wake-up call that I need to make significant changes in my life. I'll be retiring and focusing on my health. Your mother and I are also downsizing to a smaller house to reduce our financial burden. I know our relationship has been strained, but I hope you can understand that I did my best as a father. If you're willing, I'd like to meet for coffee sometime to talk. No pressure, just a conversation. Dad. I read the email 3 times, looking for manipulation or guilt trips. But it seemed genuine. For the first time, my father was acknowledging that things had been strained without blaming me for it. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to think about whether I wanted to have that conversation, whether I was ready to potentially rebuild some kind of relationship with my parents. A month later, I received a promotion at work. Gretchen called me into her office and offered me a position as a junior project manager, which came with a significant raise and more responsibility on the Portland project. You've proven yourself, Laura. You're smart, dedicated, and you handle pressure well. I think you're ready for this next step. I accepted immediately, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude and pride. That evening, I called Kelsey to share the news. That's amazing! We need to celebrate dinner tomorrow night. Absolutely. And hey, have you thought any more about the graduate program? The application deadline is coming up. I had been thinking about it. The program would mean 2 more years of school, but it would also open up opportunities for leadership roles and environmental policy. I could make an even bigger impact. I think I'm going to apply. I can do it part-time while working, and Thornberry has a tuition reimbursement program. Do it. You've come so far, Laura. Don't stop now. She was right. I'd worked too hard to stop pushing forward. I spent the next few weeks balancing my new responsibilities at work with my graduate school application. I wrote essays about my passion for environmental sustainability, my vision for creating systemic change, and my commitment to using engineering as a tool for social good. I also finally responded to my father's email. Dad, I appreciate you reaching out. I'm open to having coffee and talking, but I need you to understand that things can't go back to how they were. If we're going to have a relationship moving forward, it needs to be honest and equal. Let me know when you're available. His response came the next day. I understand. How about next Saturday at 10 o'clock? There's a cafe near my house called Morning Grounds. I'll be there. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, my stomach full of butterflies. When my father walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His face was drawn, and he moved carefully, like someone still recovering from a serious illness. We ordered coffee and sat down at a table by the window. Thank you for coming, he said. You're welcome. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the heart attack. About my life, my choices, my priorities. And I realized I've made a lot of mistakes, especially with you. I waited, not sure where this was going. Your mother and I put too much pressure on Jessica to be perfect and not enough attention on you. We took you for granted, assumed you'd be fine because you were independent and self-sufficient. But that wasn't fair to you. You deserved better. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't address all the specific ways they'd hurt me, but it was honest, and it was a start. I appreciate you saying that. I also want you to know that I read the articles about your project. I had no idea you were doing such important work. I'm impressed, and I'm sorry I wasn't there to support you along the way. I didn't tell you about it because I didn't think you'd care. I know, and that's on me. He took a sip of his coffee. I don't expect you to forgive me or to suddenly want a close relationship, but I hope we can start fresh. Maybe slowly build something better. We talked for another hour about his retirement plans, the business sale, and his health. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension, but it felt real in a way our conversations never had before. When we parted ways, I didn't feel the weight of expectation I'd always carried around my parents. I felt lighter, freer, like I'd finally let go of needing their approval. In the months that followed, my parents faced the full consequences of their choices. The business sold for far less than my father had hoped, barely covering a fraction of their debts. They had to file for bankruptcy, which meant losing their house and most of their possessions. They moved into a modest apartment and started over with almost nothing. My father took a part-time consulting job to supplement his small pension, and my mother went back to work as an administrative assistant. The lifestyle they'd worked so hard to project, the successful business owner, the comfortable suburban home, the illusion of financial stability, crumbled completely. Friends who'd admired their supposed generosity and success quietly distanced themselves when the truth came out. Jessica helped where she could, but she and Trevor had their own lives to build and couldn't bankroll my parents' recovery. As for me, I continued moving forward. I started the graduate program, excelled in my new role at Thornberry Systems, and slowly built a relationship with Jessica based on honesty rather than obligation. My father and I met for coffee occasionally, carefully reconstructing something that resembled a relationship. My mother took longer to come around, but eventually she stopped trying to manipulate me and started actually listening when we talked. Looking back on that day at Jessica's wedding, the day I handed my father that envelope and walked away, I realized it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my worth, refusing to be controlled, and choosing myself for the first time in my life. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been mine, and that made all the difference. Have you ever had a moment where you finally stood up for yourself and said, enough is enough, even when it felt terrifying? Or have you seen family dynamics that were so out of balance, it was suffocating? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below.